My wife mocked my income and told me I didn't deserve respect. I quietly showed her a hidden savings statement worth six figures, called a lawyer, and watched her learn how respect doesn't pay rent. Marriage, in my mind, was supposed to be built on three pillars: love, trust, and respect. Strip away any one of those, and you're just roommates with rings. I clung to that belief for years, telling myself that despite the cracks forming in my relationship with Claire, those pillars still stood strong. Claire and I had been together for 6 years, married for 3. She was magnetic when I met her, funny, sharp, the kind of woman who walked into a room and made people notice. I fell for her instantly, and she seemed to love that I was steady, grounded, and reliable. While her friends bounced from one flashy guy to another, I was the one who showed up, kept my promises, and had my life in order. But somewhere along the way, her admiration turned sour. The very traits she once praised, my practicality, my consistency, became boring, predictable, even embarrassing. I worked in IT. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid well enough. I'd been at the same company for years, slowly climbing the ladder. My salary was respectable, and on top of that, I had a habit Claire never developed: saving. Every paycheck, I tucked away a portion into investments and high-yield accounts. Nothing crazy, no risky gambles. Just steady, disciplined saving. Claire never asked about it. She wasn't interested in our financial health, only in what she could see: the size of the ring on her finger, the car in the driveway, the vacations we did or didn't take. To her, value was measured in labels and luxury. At first, I indulged her. Occasional dinners at upscale restaurants, surprise gifts, the spa days she loved so much. I figured that was just marriage, compromise. I liked cooking at home. She liked fine dining. I liked reading on weekends. She liked trips to boutiques. Opposites attract, right? But over time, the imbalance grew. When I suggested a quiet night in, she'd pout about missing real fun. When I hesitated to drop thousands on another handbag, she'd complain that her friends' husbands knew how to treat a woman. I brushed it off as insecurity, maybe even immaturity, thinking she'd grow out of it. Instead, it escalated. The breaking point came on an ordinary Tuesday evening, one that should have faded into memory like countless others. I had just come home from work, exhausted but satisfied with the day. My tie was loosened, my shoes were off, and I was heating up leftovers from the night before. Claire was in the living room, scrolling endlessly on her phone, her usual ritual after work. She walked into the kitchen, eyes still glued to the screen, her lips pursed in irritation. I figured she'd seen another influencer flaunting something ridiculous. Then, without looking up, she dropped the words that split my world in half. "You don't make enough money to be worth respecting." She said it flat, casual, as if she was commenting on the weather. No build-up, no anger. Just a statement of fact, at least in her mind. I froze, spoon halfway to my mouth. For a second, I thought I'd misheard her. But the way she kept scrolling, unbothered, confirmed it. She'd meant every word. It was like someone had pulled a rug out from under me. I'd worked tirelessly to provide, to keep our lives stable, to ensure we never had to worry about bills or emergencies. And yet, in her eyes, none of it mattered. I wanted to argue, to remind her of the roof over our heads, the car parked outside, the vacations we had taken, to point out that respect isn't bought. It's earned through love, loyalty, and partnership. But the words caught in my throat. Instead, I heard myself say, "Fair." She glanced at me then, smirk tugging at her lips, as if she'd finally voiced something she'd been holding back for years. Then she rolled her eyes and walked out of the kitchen, her heels clicking against the tile. Conversation over. But in that moment, something inside me shifted. What Claire didn't know, and never cared enough to ask about, was that I wasn't just the steady IT guy she mocked. I had been quietly, diligently building something she couldn't see. Over the years, I had saved, invested, and planned. My accounts held six figures, tucked away in places she never thought to look. I wasn't flashy because I didn't need to be. I was building security, not an image. She thought she'd won an argument. She thought she'd put me in my place. But in reality, she'd given me clarity. That night, as she scrolled herself to sleep beside me, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. The words replayed in my head: "Not worth respecting." It wasn't about money. It was about contempt. She didn't see me as a partner anymore. She saw me as a paycheck, and not even a good one. By morning, my decision was made. On Wednesday, I printed out my savings statement. The numbers glared back at me, undeniable proof that her perception of me was laughably wrong. On Thursday, I sat in a lawyer's office. The paperwork for divorce spread across the desk. By Friday, Claire was standing in the driveway, mascara streaking her face, shoving designer handbags and empty credit cards into trash bags as she pleaded with me. "You can't just throw me out like this," she screamed. "How am I supposed to pay rent? Groceries?" I didn't answer, because she already had her answer. Respect isn't bought, and neither is love. As I closed the door behind her, the silence felt heavier than ever, but also freeing. For the first time in years, I realized I didn't need her approval, her validation, or her warped definition of worth. Claire thought money was the ultimate power. She was about to learn that self-respect is priceless. The weekend after Claire left, the house felt impossibly quiet. For years, I'd grown used to the constant noise. Her phone blaring TikTok videos, her voice filling every room with demands or complaints, the clack of high heels echoing down the hallway. Now, it was just me, the hum of the refrigerator, and the occasional creak of the old wooden floor. I thought the silence might feel lonely. Instead, it felt like breathing clean air after living in smog. Claire's things were gone, or rather, the things she could carry in a panic were gone. Designer clothes, makeup bags, 3 pairs of heels crammed into trash bags. But the house was still dotted with traces of her. A half-empty bottle of perfume on the bathroom sink, her favorite mug in the dishwasher, lipstick smudges on the rim. I gathered the remnants carefully, boxed them, and set them by the door. Not in anger, not in bitterness, just closure. By Monday, the calls started. At first, they came as late-night voicemails. Her voice was a mix of rage and desperation. "You can't do this to me. I gave you the best years of my life." Then, "I'm sorry, okay? I didn't mean what I said. I was just frustrated. We can work this out." And then, the classic bargaining. "I'll change. I'll respect you more. Just give me another chance." I didn't answer. Not once. Because here's the truth I had finally accepted. When someone shows you who they are, believe them. And Claire had shown me, loudly and clearly, that she didn't see me as her equal, her partner, or even as a man worthy of basic respect. It wasn't about the money. It was about contempt. And contempt is the death sentence of any marriage. On Tuesday, I returned to work. My coworkers, who had heard bits and pieces of the chaos through whispered conversations, gave me sympathetic looks. A few invited me out for drinks, and for the first time in a long time, I said yes. At the bar, as laughter filled the air and the weight of responsibility lifted off my shoulders, I realized something. I had been carrying Claire's insecurity for years. Her endless comparisons, her need to flaunt, her obsession with appearances. I had shouldered it all, trying to be enough for her. But I was enough. I always had been. By Thursday, Claire escalated. The calls became texts. Dozens of them. Walls of words, swinging between insults and apologies. "You'll never find someone better than me. I made a mistake. Please, just let me come home. You're pathetic for giving up so easily. We can start fresh. I promise. I'll be different." I read them all, then set the phone down without replying. The more I ignored her, the more frantic she became. By Friday, she showed up at my office. I was sitting at my desk, reviewing a project, when the receptionist buzzed me. "Your wife is here," she said hesitantly. "Ex-wife?" I corrected gently. Claire stormed in before I could say more. She looked nothing like the polished woman who used to spend hours on her appearance. Her mascara was smudged, her hair pulled into a messy bun, and her designer jacket hung loosely off her shoulders. "We need to talk," she demanded, her voice cracking. I closed my laptop slowly, leaned back in my chair, and studied her. "About what? You can't just throw away 6 years like it's nothing." Her eyes brimmed with tears. I was upset. I didn't mean it. "You know I love you." Love. That word tasted bitter on my tongue. "You don't love me," I said quietly. "You loved what I could provide. And when you decided it wasn't enough, you told me exactly what you thought of me." She shook her head frantically. "No, no, I was wrong. I see it now. You're amazing. You're the most dependable man I've ever met. Please just—" "Claire," I interrupted, my voice firm but calm. "Respect isn't something you can take back once you've destroyed it. You can't unsay what you said." Her lip trembled. For a moment, I almost saw the woman I fell in love with. The girl who laughed at my corny jokes, who used to curl up next to me with a book, who once said she admired how steady I was. But that woman was gone, buried under layers of vanity, greed, and resentment. Claire left my office that day in tears. That night, I sat at home with a glass of whiskey, staring at the savings statement still pinned to my desk. 6 figures. More than enough to start fresh, to build the life I wanted. And for the first time in years, I allowed myself to dream. Dream about traveling, not for Instagram photos, but for the experience. Dream about buying a small cabin somewhere quiet, away from the noise. Dream about finding someone who valued me for who I was, not for how many digits were in my paycheck. Claire's voice still echoed in my head sometimes, those venomous words about respect and money. But instead of cutting me down, they fueled me, because she was wrong, and I was about to prove it, not to her, but to myself. Update 1: the first weekend without Claire, I woke up later than usual. No sound of a hair dryer, no arguments about brunch reservations, no lists of honey-do tasks that were more about status than necessity. The house was quiet, eerily quiet, but in that silence, I found peace. I poured myself a cup of coffee and sat on the back porch, watching the sun climb over the trees. For the first time in years, my chest didn't feel heavy. It was as if her words, cutting, sharp, designed to belittle, had finally been peeled off my skin, leaving me raw but free. Claire, meanwhile, was unraveling. At first, she tried the public performance route. I know because mutual friends told me. She posted on Instagram with captions like independent and thriving cherry blossom sparkles, paired with staged photos at cafes. But cracks showed quickly. One friend confided that she was living with her mother again, and her posts were less about thriving and more about convincing herself she hadn't lost. The same friends who once looked at me like I was lucky to have her began to look at her differently. When you build your identity around being admired, the absence of respect is louder than any insult. On Tuesday, one of my buddies forwarded me a screenshot from her story, a passive-aggressive meme about men who can't handle strong women. I laughed, not out of cruelty, but because strength isn't measured by how loudly you belittle the person you promised to love. By Thursday, she had tried another tactic: pity. Her texts shifted from anger to desperation. I don't have enough for rent. You know how expensive everything is now. I just need a little help until I get back on my feet. Please don't abandon me like this. I'm scared. I read them all, set the phone down, and didn't reply. Because here's the thing: Claire hadn't been abandoned. She had been respected, supported, and loved for years. And she threw it away. Actions have weight, and her words had consequences. Meanwhile, my own life began to take a different shape. At work, I threw myself into projects I'd neglected, rediscovering the satisfaction of solving problems without the distraction of constant drama. My boss noticed. She pulled me aside one afternoon and said, "I don't know what's changed, but you've been sharper than ever." I smiled and said, "Just a little less noise at home." Outside of work, I reconnected with old friends, the ones Claire had always dismissed as boring or unambitious. We grabbed beers, swapped stories, and laughed until our sides hurt. It was humbling to realize how many connections I'd let wither because I was busy trying to appease someone who would never be satisfied. The turning point came 2 weeks later, when Claire showed up at my door unannounced. She wasn't wearing designer clothes this time. No polished smile. Just a hoodie, leggings, and eyes swollen from crying. She stood there clutching a bag, her voice small. "I don't have anywhere else to go," she whispered. There was a time when those words would have broken me, when I would have reached out, pulled her close, promised her everything would be okay. But that time had passed. I stepped outside, closed the door behind me, and stood on the porch with her. "Claire," I said quietly, "you do have somewhere to go. You chose not to value what you had. Now you're facing the reality of that choice." She started crying harder, muttering apologies, promising change. I listened, not to her words, but to the echo of all the years I'd spent hoping for change that never came. When she reached for my hand, I stepped back. "You said I wasn't worth respecting," I reminded her gently. "Now you're learning that respect is the foundation of everything else. Without it, love can't survive." Her sobs grew louder, almost theatrical, but I didn't budge. Finally, when it was clear I wouldn't let her in, she turned and walked away. I stood there until she disappeared down the street. the bag slung over her shoulder like a symbol of all the weight she now had to carry herself. That night, I poured another glass of whiskey and thought about how strange life is. Sometimes the person who swears you'll never make it without them ends up proving just how much stronger you are on your own. Claire wanted to measure my worth in dollars. But I knew now my worth wasn't in my bank account. It was in my peace, my dignity, and my refusal to accept less than respect. And that, I realized, was priceless. Final update that it's been 6 months since Claire walked out of my driveway with that single bag slung over her shoulder. 6 months since I stood there, calm, refusing to let guilt undo years of erosion. 6 months since she told me I wasn't worth respecting, and I showed her that respect is the one thing money can't buy back once it's gone. A lot has happened since then. The first few weeks after I turned her away were filled with silence, followed by chaos. Mutual friends told me she'd bounced between couches, her mother's, a couple of girlfriends, even briefly with an ex she swore she'd blocked years ago. Each time, it ended badly. She had a way of wearing people down with her expectations, always needing, never giving. One mutual friend, Sarah, confided to me over coffee. Claire hasn't figured it out yet. She thinks if she just finds the right guy, someone with more money, she'll land on her feet. But men talk, you know. Word gets around. People can smell desperation. She's burning bridges faster than she can cross them. I nodded, listening, but didn't add much. I'd stopped feeling bitter. By then, Claire's life wasn't my story anymore. At work, my promotion came through, a team lead position I'd been overlooked for in the past. My boss pulled me into her office and said, "Your focus is sharper, your leadership has matured. Whatever you're doing differently, keep it up." I smiled. I didn't explain that my clarity came from subtraction, not addition. Removing Claire from my life had been like lifting a fog. But Claire wasn't done trying. One evening in late spring, she called from a new number. Against my better judgment, I answered. Her voice was shaky, almost rehearsed. "I know I hurt you. I know I said things I can't take back. But I want you to understand. I was scared. I thought money was the only way to measure security. I was wrong. Please, can we talk?" For a moment, a flicker of the old Claire surfaced, the woman I once fell for. Vulnerable, human. But then I remembered the years of mockery, the constant comparison to others, the disdain that had chipped away at me until I was questioning my own value. "I hope you figure yourself out, Claire," I said gently. "But I'm not your solution anymore." She started crying, pleading, but I ended the call. Then I blocked the number. That was the last time I heard her voice directly. A month later, she made one final public attempt to control the narrative. An Instagram post, long caption, teary-eyed selfie. Something about being betrayed and abandoned. But the comments told the real story. People weren't buying it anymore. "Didn't you say he wasn't worth respecting? Funny how the man you mocked has moved on and leveled up while you're still complaining online." Maybe the problem isn't him, Claire. The likes were few. The sympathy was gone. The image she had built, glamorous, admired, untouchable, had collapsed. And me? I wasn't perfect. I had my own scars to heal. Therapy helped. Sitting in that chair, unpacking years of small cuts, I realized how insidious disrespect can be. It doesn't shatter all at once. It corrodes slowly, drop by drop, until one day you're hollow. Claire's words that night in the kitchen weren't the start of the problem. They were the final straw. But in healing, I also discovered resilience I didn't know I had. I reconnected with hobbies, guitar, hiking, even dabbling in photography. I built a circle of friends who valued laughter over luxury, effort over image. And yes, there's someone new. I won't say too much, because it's early and fragile, but she's kind. She listens. She respects without needing proof. When I told her about my past, she didn't roll her eyes or make jokes. She just took my hand and said, "I'm glad you chose yourself." It hit me then. That's all I ever wanted. Not grand gestures, not expensive gifts, just mutual respect. Claire once told me I didn't make enough money to be worth respecting. But in the end, it wasn't about money at all. It was about values. She spent her respect like it was endless, never saving, never investing, never realizing that one day she'd look around and find the account empty. And me? I built mine slowly, quietly, patiently. And now, I live off the dividends of peace. Do I hate her? No. Do I wish her harm? Not at all. In fact, I hope she finds clarity, maybe even happiness. But I know one thing with absolute certainty. I will never again let someone convince me my worth is negotiable. Respect, once lost, is the most expensive thing to try to buy back. Claire learned that the hard way. And me? I learned that the richest man in the room is the one who finally knows his value.